Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another informative session of Grey Beyond Narratives. Today's debate center on Mahatma Gandhi, one of the world's most influential figures, not just in subcontinent. We will embark on an insightful exploration of Gandhi Ji's life and legacy as India commemorates Gandhi Ji's birthday, known as Gandhi Jayanti. Gandhiji played a critical role in India's independence in 1947. His unwavering commitment to nonviolence and encapsulating in the Satyagraha philosophy resonating around the world, inspiring civil rights movements such as Martin Luther King. Our discussion today, however, dwells deeper. We address his reservation looking at issues such as caste and his perceived role in the subcontinent's partition. While we honor Gandhiji's advocacy for social and political change, there are complexities that require our attention. His treatment of the Dalits, also known as the untouchables, has been criticized. Despite his effort to lift them up, some perceived his language and actions as paternalistic and condescending, an aspect of his legacy that we must not overlook. Today's sessions features speakers from both India and Pakistan, fostering a comprehensive dialogue. We hope to unravel the complex threads of Gandhiji's life, acknowledging both his enormous contributions and the shortcomings that characterized his journey. It's more than just a history lesson, it's an examination of a multifaceted personality. Today, in the session, we will explore the complexities of Mahatma Gandhi's life, recognizing the nuisance that defines this larger than life figure. Let us get to the heart of the matter, encompassing Gandhi's stories, dark and light side. I will move forward to Shaji to introduce further. Shaji?
Yes, thank you very much. Am I audible? Can you guys hear me? Can you provide that?
जी, we can hear you. आवाज आ रही है.
जी, शुक्रिया. So, a lot of people consider Gandhi to be this person who was supposed to be an advocate, somebody who was a freedom fighter, but not many people till recent years realized that Gandhi also has a whole group of diaspora or people who kind of oppose him, both in the subcontinent, particularly in India. And there are large groups who, specifically in recent times, have basically brought a more controversial and an opposing side so much against him, so much so that his assassinator person who killed him is revered by some of these people and they treat him like a hero. So we thought it would be a good point of conversation to try and understand the political background and politics behind that thing because we're talking about an individual who is like at the very center of the political and social fabric of India, which happens to be one of the fastest growing countries in the world, one of the largest and in terms of economies and largest in terms of the population of people around the globe. So, uh, in a country where they almost revered as an entire nation, a hero, officially considered to be a father figure for over a billion people. All of a sudden, what happened that there is this dark side of him which is emerging, everything from his political side to the very notion that he might have even been a British agent, according to some of these people. So these are some of the questions which we're going to look at. These are going to be the point of conversations. So uh, I think Naimaji is here. I think we'll start from Naimaji in what her main perception in regards to Gandhi is, and then as the conversation progresses, others will join in. Go ahead, Naimaji.
Shaji, sorry, I'm busy with the guests. Can you please go ahead and I will soon, join you. Give me 10, 15 minutes.
That's fine. That's fine. That's
Before
fine.
I mean, see off my guest, huh? Please,
Yeah, yeah,
I'm sorry. Huh?
that's
Okay,
fine.
okay,
Aditya,
okay, okay.
Aditya.
I think Gandhi, to see anything in black and white is a very like you know narrow understanding of any person. I would say that every human being is complex, right? So we have some traits that are not we even ourselves are not very proud of. Then there are things that we actually care about, and the changes that we want to see in the society or our impression, and we actually want to work for the society, and we do things uh, for those ideas. And then there are shortcomings in our own thinking, which I think with time sometimes we do correct, sometimes we we are not able to. If we take an example, the people who the who created the United States of America, or the father of the nations, they were they are highly revered in the United States. Doesn't mean they had no flaws. For example, they had they had many slaves, and to have a slave in the 18th century was, for a rich white European person, was a very normal thing. Nobody even thought that owning people is not a right thing to do. So when we talk about Gandhi Ji, some of the ideas that he had initially, which obviously not obviously, but he did correct about himself, also reflects on how narrow minded he himself was. But some of his ideas were very revolutionary. Those ideas transformed an entire society, inspired revolutionaries around the globe. But he also had ideas which were very racist, and which were we some ideas which he thought were his experimentations with his sexuality, or his understanding of universe, or his connection to the god, which he thought was totally acceptable. But as an outsider, you'll be think that that's not the right thing to do. So if we take an example, that the first time when we talk about Gandhiji, while traveling in the train, was thrown out of the train, he wasn't upset because he was thrown out because he was brown or Indian. He was upset because he thought that the white Britishers, they treated him as they would treat a black African, right? So he was more upset to be to because he was treated like the blacks, not because he wasn't European, right? So he somehow thought that being brown is at least better than being black. So he wasn't, at that time, that idea wasn't a very revolutionary idea. He himself thought that browns were better than blacks, which later in his life, those ideas he did change. He talked about it, and he even wrote about it, and how his views changed about all human beings. He also was a religious person. He believed in the religion and the ideas of Hinduism, so far so that he even talked to the the untouchables, and to the Adivasis, and it will be a very strange thing to say that if it wasn't for Gandhiji, a lot of people who now call themselves Hindus would have sided their path, would have sided away from the ideas of Hinduism, which, because Hinduism is such a broad ideas, that it incorporates all all ideas which are it can. So for example, the Adivasis had very strange and very, for the for the society that we live in, very strange ideas, which in today's time we would not be calling a part of Hinduism, but he incorporated all those ideas and tried to make them a part of the larger idea of a Hindu. So he incorporated even the untouchables who were always considered outside of the the fold of the dharma or the religion of Hinduism. He even tried to appropriate those ideas. So I think at now if you ask me, was it a right thing to do or not, for a nationalist person who believes in the idea of Hinduism and we Hindus are all one. So he was the biggest Hindutva. If you would ask me that, his contribution to Hinduism is far greater than anybody else in the last 100 years. But the same people who are Hindu nationalists would argue that he was somebody who was the biggest block on the idea of Hinduism and India. So I think Gandhiji was a complex personality. We should further discuss his ideas and his some people, the way he's blamed for the partition of India. Again, it's a very complex story, but people don't know what they're talking about when they talk about partition of India. We can further discuss it, but that's my opening statement, I guess.
Hmm. So why do you consider think, Aditya, that there are so many people, like for instance, who refer to him as somebody who sided with Muslims? You will hear a lot of RSS right wing supporters mention the fact that he was a supporter of the Caliphate movement, which had begun again. What exactly was going on in your opinion? Was he
So
favoring
the
monotheism?
again the ideas of the Khalifa movement and his support for that movement, it's again was just because he wanted to appropriate or to garner the support of the largest subcontinent Indian Muslims. He wanted to get their support to not let the country be divided. So he tried to say things on those Muslims' behalf. So if anything, he was trying not to not to let this country be divided on the lines of religion. So yes, he did talk about what was happening in Turkey in the 1920s and the 1910s. Yes, he did, but it wasn't because of his love for the Muslims, but because he actually cared about the people. He wanted the Indians or the South Asians to be, to stay united. At some points, he even was he went out of his way to support the Muslims because he thought that Muslims were a minority, and somehow, he thought that it was his responsibility to, to take extra care, or at least, at least vocally, to make statements which will keep these two fractions together, because the idea that Britishers wanted to divide and rule, he wanted to unite those people back. So yeah, that's my argument for it. Another short point that I want to make is that if you read in history, you how can you kill a movement? For example, if today we talk about any separatist movement, you divide the population into different ideas, right? So if you talk about Khalistan, you can divide the population into Hindu and Sikhs. If you talk about Kashmir, you can divide the population into Shia, Sunni, or whatever, other fractions. And you support one group, the others can support the other group, and you divide the population so nobody can get a combined idea. So he was doing what he thought would unite the people of the subcontinent against a common enemy, which was the Britishers. So that's my understanding.
But then some would question his relationship with the British, which was always cordial. In
Yeah,
fact,
because they were British were the ruling class of the society. The British were the people who were like the government or the sarkar of that time. You can't be so he always wanted a peaceful Satyagraha type idea. He always had peaceful ideas. That was his USP. his ideas was always peacefully resisting the ideas that for like example Dandi March or Salt March, where he talked about like that we it's our salt. Why are we paying taxes on our own salt, right? So he marched to that place in Gujarat where he used to extract the salt, and he tried to take it himself. The idea behind it was that we will peacefully ask for what rightfully belongs to us. You may agree with his ideas, or you may disagree with his ideas. His idea was that you can't fight the Britishers. The only way you can achieve freedom is by not complying. That was his idea of how you get freedom, when you unite together
But
and you
what
don't comply.
what exactly would entail non-compliance? Because from what I've seen and from what I have read, there have been occasions where he actually went and helped the British forces recruit more local people, and he was an advocate of
Recruit more people in.
in the British Army.
Again, it doesn't matter, even if it did, I haven't read much about it, but even if it did, how does it matter? He wasn't working against the Britishers. He was just trying not to comply. He wanted eventually to unite the people against one, the Britisher, because they were outsiders, and he believed that they were unjustifiably were looting the Indians, taxing the Indians for what was rightfully belonged to them. So he even had meetings with the Britishers. He was very cordial to the Britisher. He never wanted to kill the Britishers. He just wanted to resist in the way that we are not going to comply with your ideas, and slowly and steadily we'll get together and we'll stop complying. So that was his greater idea, to not to support the Britishers one against another, right? To divide the Indian people in smaller bunches, smaller communities, and help the Britisher, right? That at the end of the day, Britishers will be the people who will all resolve all our problems, and we Indians will be divided into 100 smaller chunks and parts. So he said that we are one, and if we come together, all of us, if we come back together, and if we resist the Britishers, that's only how we can get freedom from the British. So it doesn't mean he wasn't a flawed person. He had many flaws, but again, he never took another example. He never took any kind of salary from the British until he was working, not in Africa, but after he came back from Africa. He never got a penny from the Britishers. He never charged any money for his services, or he never got any pension from the Britishers. Unlike some of the known revolutionaries, or freedom fighters, which did. So of course he was cordial to the British. Doesn't mean he was in beds with the British or something like that. He had his ideas, and he wanted to work according to them. He wasn't anything that is popular, he'll join those ideas. He had his own unique ideas, I guess. And he could have been wrong or right at many points, right? He wasn't a perfect person. He had flaws. But he did what he thought was the right thing to do at the moment.
Mhm. That's fine. So we'll move to Ishika now, and then we're going to come back to a few of the other questions, which I think can be interesting at the later half of the conversation. So, Ishika, what is your take? Do you think that if within India, Mahatma Gandhi is still like a revered personality, and what exactly does Mahatma Gandhi, as in like father of the nation, exactly mean to a normal Indian, or what position in society does he hold in terms of figurehead, if you may go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Shaji, for the opportunity. So, like my views on Mahatma Gandhi is kind of very like ambiguous, and I personally think that a person never gets popularity, or a person never gets attention. It is the idea that gets the attention. And ideas can be bad or can be good, or like can be like uh, depending on the thinking of the person who is like perceiving it. So I think it was the ideas of Mahatma Gandhi that were popularized, whether be it the Satyagraha or be the civil disobedience movement, and basically the peaceful resolution and the peaceful demand of a free state. That was the idea which he was professing. So, and I think some people may like perceive it to be good or bad depending on their political leanings, but we cannot ignore a fact that a coin has two sides, right? He was protesting in a peaceful manner for a free state, but on the other hand he made the biggest blunder in the history of the subcontinent, which was the partition. Like I and like many people who belong to the political faction in which I believe in believe in this, that the partition was the biggest blunder that ever happened in the subcontinent, which resulted into numerous massacres, numerous killings of innocent people. So I think that was a thing due to which I do not have a very good image of Gandhi in my mind. But yeah, the salt satyagraha, the Dandi March with Aditya mentioned about, that was a great initiative. Uh, for removing the tax on the salt, because salt was a not basic necessity, not even back then, but today also salt is a very basic necessity. And paying tax on salt is like paying tax on air and like paying tax for drinking water. I think it is the same thing. So salt was a basic necessity, and I think Dandi March was one of the great initiatives taken by Mahatma Gandhi to remove the tax on salt. And other than that, there was the civil disobedience movement, where the people, I think, from where the idea of Swaraj came, I think, and the idea of what you call it, indigenous products came. The idea was actually to promote the indigenous products and to reject the British products, and using and from there itself the idea of the charkha came, where he motivated the Indian people to basically bring charkhas into their home, and like making products out of khadi, the the clothes and all. So I think he had some great ideas, and plus also he did a like huge blunder. So like that is my take on Mahatma Gandhi.
So, Ishika, you said a political group in India these days has a few differences with Gandhi and his initiative. One thing that you did mention was, well, of course, the separation between Pakistan and India. Uh, but that can possibly not be the only particular reason that a portion of the political spectrum disagrees or uh, I don't know if it's the right word to use, denounce the father of the nation himself. There must be some other things, some political differences that are much more deep rooted than just the separation between Pakistan and India. That uh, in this day and age, in India, we see a disassociation with the concepts of the father of the nation himself. What do you think are those particular reasons or those particular political differences, or are there political differences at all, or are there some other sorts of differences? Can you please tell us a little bit about that?
I actually do not possess a much brief knowledge on the intricacies of the partition. So, like, if you could like throw some light on it, like, I'm open to criticism.
No, I'm not asking for the intricacies of the partition. You
I can ask you something about it. Like, what exact thing or like, statement do you think Gandhi gave which led to the partition of India?
He was, I think, the part of the committee which included Nehru and Gandhi and other big political figures of the pre-independence era. who like decided to make the partition happen. So that is the reason why me and many Indians and consider Gandhi to
But
be a reason
Ishika,
behind the partition.
it wasn't Nehru or Gandhi who ever agreed to the partition. It was a negotiation. I think in the negotiation in which Nehru and Gandhiji failed, and Jinnah was able to capture the minds of the people, and the ideas failed, and they conducted those votes and elections in which they won, and the partition happened. It was a negotiation with the Muslim League, and the negotiation failed. Till today, I can't find one person who can clearly tell me the statement or the incidents where it was pretty clear that Gandhi and Nehru wanted partition.
Can I say something?
जी नहीं मुझे
जी जी नहीं
Ji. The
नहीं जी बोलिए बोलिए
Ji. The first thing is that this tragedy of our times is that many partition leaders, including Gandhi and Jinnah, they have been understood according to our likings and our ideology and what we believed in. We have never analyzed them with this sort of an independent thought or impartial thinking. That's why this time also you can see when every time you talk about Jinnah or you talk about Gandhi, you will have different perspectives and which we don't read in the books. Definitely, if you read Aisha Jalal or if you read Stephen Cohen or other people, you get totally a somewhat different picture. During my childhood, my perception of Gandhi was totally different. I mean, what we have read in the books, he was an icon. He was an ideal person. He was a down to earth man, having connections with those people in the society who didn't have any place there, who didn't have any voice, and who didn't matter, be it Dalits, be it untouchables, Adivasis, and the people from the lower strata of society. Now, if you see this time, the way the Indian politics is changing its landscape now, I think it has made us to think again and again and ask ourselves who the real Gandhi was. The one which we've been told earlier and we read in the books about him, or the books he wrote, or the Gandhi is one which in India, present politics is defining him. Uh, this is the one question because this is, the process of rewriting history is going on at a pace this time, and the Gandhi is also getting redefined and reinvented. The one thing is that. Another thing is, okay, Gandhi, he was a real Hindu. There was no doubt about it. And he believed in his faith, which to some people at that time was an issue. But those critical, even including RSS, those critical of his policies are again now questioning about this thing. Was he a real Hindu, true Hindu? If yes, why did he, fight with his own leadership, including Nehru and Patel and Azad, to give Pakistan the sum as promised at the time of the partition? Because, he wanted to go to Pakistan and have a visit there and heal the wounds which were caused by the partition between different communities. And then it cost his life. And in one of the rallies of Indian National Congress, I think it was between 1910 to 1920 when Jinnah had first time come to India, and he was getting involved in the politics at that time. And Jinnah was also attending that Indian National Congress rally, and this Gandhi, he introduced Jinnah. It was for the first time in history, and Jinnah was introduced as the leader of Muslims. And Jinnah was taken aback because at that time Jinnah was totally different, and it didn't matter to him whether it's in Muslims, Hindus, because he was now a Congress leader, and he believed that he represents every other, religion or caste or people. But it was at that time that Jinnah was made conscious of his religion, and it is written by, I think it's Aisha Jalal or somebody else, and that after that, Jinnah had this belief that I am Muslim, Gandhi is Hindu, and this uh, difference between us is there, and it is a real difference, and it will remain there. But Gandhi, as a Hindu, accepted Jinnah as a Muslim, not what we say this time. This facade of secularism and everything. They have their own religion, no doubt about it. Jinnah was not a religious person, but Gandhi was. But despite that, the Gandhi accepted Jinnah as a Muslim, recognized his religion, and after that, we have seen when this separate homeland movement started for Pakistan, and Jinnah was to some, I'm sorry, Gandhi was to some extent in favor of having a separate homeland for Pakistan Muslims. That's what RSS has a grudge, and they developed a sort of a grudge against Gandhi, saying that if Gandhi would have taken a tough stand at that time, there would have been no Pakistan, because the most of the leadership, including Nehru, he was not also in. Uh, to any, sort of by having any sort of this indication that we are going to give a separate land to Muslims. But Gandhi was sort of a little bit different, and he couldn't resist Jinnah's this separate homeland demand. So that's how Gandhi accepted Muslims and also their separate homeland, and couldn't resist Jinnah's demand. I think that's the main point these days when the history is being rewritten in India, particularly, and by the RSS. And these things have become sticking point, and it is becoming a point of contention for RSS, which it is raising in rallies, in seminars. This time that Gandhi has done a damage to the this to India. Otherwise, it would have been a united India. There would not have been separate country. If Gandhi could have taken a stand, what Nehru or Patel or Azad and other leaders at that time took. So that's my point.
So Naima ji, can you give any examples where you think Gandhi ji indicated that he favored partitioned India rather than a united India, any examples that you gave me example that you have read what Aisha Jalal has written, were there any instances where it was apparent that Gandhi ji supported the partition than having a united India? Anything comes to your mind?
Actually, I have read a lot about these things. I'm so sorry, I have forgotten this, and I didn't get time. I would have gone through these, books, and because I have written about this thing also in my dissertation, the partition theory. But there have been, one or two instances when Gandhi and Jinnah had a dialogue together about this, when he started to have this separate homeland demand, and Gandhi wanted to convince him first that, it's not good for India. We are fighting jointly and all that. But 1940 resolution before that, he tried to convince him. But after that, when the resolution was passed, I think after that, Gandhi took a different stand. And he didn't give open, indication that I am in favor of. But the way he was treating Jinnah, and the way he was accommodating Jinnah, and the way he was listening to Jinnah and giving him space after 1940 resolution, I think most of the authors, they believe that Gandhi took a very soft stand in favor of Pakistan, in favor of Jinnah, which Nehru particularly didn't like it, and they had a little bit of, I mean, this conflict between them about this, the how Gandhi is treating, why he is giving so much of, so taking so much of soft stand. And
Yeah,
Uh,
I don't think that's totally incorrect what Naimaji you just mentioned. There are like some instances where it is little evident that he did not mind, like the he did support Jinnah in some things. Also, like during the negotiations of Congress and Muslim League, there were some ideas in which Gandhi Ji and Nehru and all these people were a little hesitant. They thought they were giving in too much in the negotiations, and they weren't too happy. Like uh, the Muslim majority areas, they believed that they were giving a lot of autonomy to them, but also they were at the same time they were giving a lot of power to those people in the undivided India, and also a lot of autonomy, which Jinnah wanted to keep it forever, and Nehru and Gandhi ji were like not very happy with those negotiations. So we can always argue that who was right, who was wrong, but we can never say that exactly at any point that they were clearly favoring the partition. Of course, like everyone have like instances where which they point out to portray that it was otherwise. The same ideas when we talk about Jinnah, like some people say he was a very big, like favor of a secular Pakistan. Some people argue no, he wanted a religious Pakistan, and no one can clearly prove otherwise, right? So I think like we'll never know what was going on in their own minds, but there are a lot of instances which tell us like a lot of things we can take out from their thinking. So I think Naimaji, let's talk to some other people too. Desinio, what do you have to say about Gandhi ji?
Yes, how are you guys? Like I said in the chat, I'm not too familiar with Gandhi ji and all that. I just had a theory. I wanted to see what do you guys think because you have much more knowledge about this. I was just thinking about it yesterday, and I agree with when she said the one of the biggest mistake was the partition. What do you think that about this idea that the British, wherever they used to rule, right? Once they were kicked out of that place, before they were kicked out, they always used to like divide that land and partition it in such a way that the people, when they leave, they just fight among themselves and they never get into power to be a challenge to the British. In Africa, in other places, wherever they left or they were kicked out, they always ended up splitting those places into different countries or areas, and then once they left, the people over there would just fight with each other. So my idea was that when this partition thing was happening in at that time before 1947, maybe 1940s and stuff, the when the British saw that yes, eventually they will have to leave India, they were trying to see like how can we leave India in such a way that the India can never become a power and challenge them in the future. So they were looking for a way to do that, and they couldn't find anything because there was too much unity. The Indian Congress, Nehru, Jinnah, all these people were all part of one organization trying to get an independence. So they didn't see any way of breaking it until I think that there was an incident that happened where all the leadership of the Indian Congress Party got locked up in jail. And there was a vacuum of leadership at that time. Jinnah was not locked in jail. And during that vacuum, Jinnah's his prominence became a little bit more. He gave some speeches and all that. He became a little bit more popular. And his narrative about a separate Muslim state worked very well with the idea of British. It's like, wait a second, this guy wants to divide India into two pieces. He wants to make up Muslim country and India will be split if we go ahead with this idea. And I think the British were like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's support this guy. Let's push his agenda even more. That eventually, once we leave, India will be divided into Muslims and Hindus. And then, since they divided into two countries, they will never have the capacity to challenge us and they'll probably fight with each other. And that's basically what happened in the end. That that's my theory, that they actually
No,
saw.
but Neo, like your theory is self contradictory in a way that the argument from where you begin itself proves itself wrong, right? So when you say that the Britishers wanted to remain a superpower, but they were a declining power at the time when they were leaving, America was already a superpower, and Britishers or the United Kingdom was a declining power. And even Nehru in his letters even wrote that the upcoming few superpowers will be those of United States, China, and Soviet Union and India. He clearly mentioned that. He did not even mention any of the European countries, which were the ruling powers in the early 20th century and the 19th century. So he himself never believed that the people who divided or partitioned India, even Nehru had already said that they will not remain superpowers any longer, which they even did not. So when you say that they were
No, I'm
they
saying
somehow
from the,
wanted to remain
yeah,
superpower, they
no,
were
from the
already a
perspective
declining
of the
power.
British. I'm saying from the perspective of the British, wherever they left after colonization, the countries in India, in Africa, and all that stuff, they split the countries before they left. And my
Why
idea is they would
how
do the
would
same
that
thing
help
because
them?
it's a scorch earth policy. Like, okay, if we're gonna leave this place, we're not gonna leave it in such a condition that they can ever become powerful. We should do something so
But
that
why
once
would
we
they
leave.
Can
care?
I can
When
I ask
you
you
care
a
when you're a
question?
superpower.
Sorry, Aditya. You may continue the conversation, but I just have one thing. It's very well having theories and stuff, but what exactly is your theory based upon? Do you have any references, or is it just
Based on
something?
history, how British
Yeah,
treated
can you
other
give?
colonized.
Can you provide a few references
I
in
don't
those
have the names
regards?
of the places right now with me, but based on how British was colonizing all like different places in Africa and other Far Eastern places and all that, whenever they left, right, they would leave that place and give them independence, but they would split the country before they would give in. I read that as an
And
article
how do
somewhere.
you think that would have helped the Britishers
It
when
would
they were
help
leaving
the
and
Britishers.
dividing the
Like, let's
countries?
say, for example, if imagine if Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh was one nation, right? Imagine partition never happened. They were still one nation. Imagine how much more progress and development this whole nation as a whole could have done. All the
We
resources
would
that
never
Pakistan.
know. We
No,
would
no,
never
that's why
know.
I'm just
How
giving you a
how
thought
can you say
experiment.
they would
We
have
could
As a
have
thought experiment.
killed each other.
Neo?
We could have killed each other
Neo,
also.
you can say the same thing about anything.
Yeah,
Say
but
if it
the thing is
wasn't.
that he
Oh,
said
hold
was
on.
they
Listen
would
to
kill.
me.
Yeah.
Listen to me. I can say the same thing. If Silicon Valley would have been in Pakistan or India, they would have developed IT. Uh, इस तरह तो कुछ भी कह सकते हैं कि ये ना हुआ
इसी
होता
को
तो
तो
वो
थॉट
हुआ
एक्सपेरिमेंट
होता
कहते हैं।
और ऐसे
नहीं नहीं,
हुआ
तो इसी को
होता
तो थॉट एक्सपेरिमेंट कहते हैं। दिस इज
नहीं, नहीं,
व्हाट द
नहीं,
थॉट
इसको
एक्सपेरिमेंट इज।
फिगमेंट ऑफ इमेजिनेशन कहते हैं। So we're not here to
Maybe
discuss कि
partition
क्या
was a good thing.
हुआ होता।
Maybe if partition wouldn't have happened, we all
हाँ,
would have been. There would have been a
आप
civil war in India. How
Why
can
do
एग्जैक्टली
you
you
think
say
that?
that there wouldn't have been a
Why do
civil war in India?
India, Hindus and Muslims and Sikhs were living in India for hundreds of years together. So why would you think
No,
that when the
never.
British would
and were
leave,
they
They
And
were
living
we
never
were
all of
living
a
peacefully?
sudden
together.
there would be civil war?
no, no, no.
एक
We
second ना Aditya. So Desi Neo, were they living peacefully? And if they were living peacefully, then why do we have Sikhs, Hindus, and Muslims always talking about conflict of the past? The In recent times, if you look at the Hindus, वो उसको शिवाजी महाराज छत्रपति who fought against the Muslims उसको रेफर करते हैं, उसको हीरो की तरह पोर्ट्रे करते हैं। मुसलमानों को देखें तो वो अब्दाली और मुगलों को करते हैं। अगर सिखों को देखें तो वो भी इसी तरह उनके रेफरेंस हैं। वो तो यहाँ तक कहते हैं कि उन्होंने हिंदू औरतों को बचाया मुसलमानों से। ठीक है, तो व्हेन वी लुक एट ऑल दीज थिंग्स, तो मुझे तो कोई प्यार मोहब्बत नजर नहीं आता। आप कौन से प्यार मोहब्बत की बात कर रहे हैं? It was
We were
always
living here for 800
all
years.
of these communities trying to rule each other.
We
Okay.
were not living peacefully in here in the past 800 years, Neo. Uh, we were living together. There is no doubt about it. And we have a lot of wars. We killed each
Yeah, the
We're
other
still
kings were
in
living
fighting all
together
the
multiple.
if you think
time.
about it.
The kings were fighting each other all the time.
Yeah.
India, total, most of the India united together was the only time in the last 1200, 1500 years was under Aurangzeb. And that too for a very short period. And since he captured a lot of land in South Asia, Aurangzeb, for a very short period, look what happened after that. The Britishers and these Europeans came. Marathas started taking chunk of parts of India. In the north, the Sikhs started fighting. The Rajputs were fighting. There was a lot of infighting as well. How can you say that everything was so peaceful when everyone was living peacefully together? Just after Aurangzeb's death, there was civil wars in South India, North India, East India, West India, everywhere. That's a very
मैं एक और
but
चीज
but
आदित्य
i
ऐड
think i
करना।
think that was happening around the world, right? All the
या
Yeah, but
monarchies
we
were doing
can't
that.
we can't say that
But I
everyone was
think his
living
point
peacefully.
is,
They were not.
no, peace time se pehle to I don't think anyone around the world was living peacefully. I think we cannot forget the Nazi period, right? What was happening in the Germany and what was happening with the blacks in the Britain itself. So I think peacetime se pehle whole world was in chaos. We cannot like
So
say
we
कि कोई
can
एक
never
ऐसा मुल्क
know
था.
what
No, but
that's what
the
I'm
point
saying.
here
We
is, no,
cannot
Aditya,
say
but
that we all
नहीं, the
could have been
point here
living
is,
peacefully.
नहीं, the point here is कि peace time से पहले there was chaos around the world, but people were coexisting, right? Same was the case with the subcontinent.
But don't you think that's
Yeah,
the
so we're
case
still
right now
coexisting.
as well? What's the difference right now? If we think about it, it's just
Even
before
if we
it was
Ishika,
divided
even if you
into.
look at the India Pakistan and India Bangladesh border, even with three wars, South Asia has never been more peaceful in the last 70 years if we compare it to it any time in the last 3000 years. It's the
And
most
Aditya,
peaceful
I
this
would
region
like to
has been.
add, I would like
I
to add,
don't. Yeah.
even in terms of Pakistan and the whole rivalry with India, maximum amount of wars, those three wars, how long have they
Yeah,
been?
how many people
India,
would have died in the three wars? All
yeah,
included.
and on top of that, India is not even like Pakistan's most dangerous border. That's Afghanistan, where
Can I
Pakistan
add
has been
something
at
here?
war for 40 years. Go ahead.
I can guarantee
So
that
what
not
I
more
wanted
than
to
a
say
hundred
was,
thousand
hey,
people would have
in
died
the
in the last three wars that India and Pakistan fought. That's I think that's a very very minute number if you look at subcontinent's history relative to the population. It was the most peaceful times.
I wanted to add this thing that as compared to the past, which were mostly kingdoms, ठीक है? If British would have never came here, the situation would have been completely different. I agree, ठीक है? हो सकता था कि kingdoms होते तो शायद it would have been different, right? But that was not the case. British ने हमें एक parliament system दिया and yeah, उन्हीं ने दिया and everything, and it was supposed to be a party system, ठीक है? In that situation, जहाँ पे हम United India की बात करते हैं, we have entities like JI, we have entities like RSS, ठीक है? Not to वो, but these are just kind of entities which were on extreme side of the religion, and as we can see in India, the RSS have taken over, ठीक है, BJP party, and in Pakistan there is also this certain extremism that have taken its a shape. तो अगर हम एक पे होते ना तो ये चीजें इसी तरह से अनफोल्ड होनी थी, ठीक है? यही मसले होने थे जो आज इंडियन मुस्लिम फेस कर रहे हैं, या पाकिस्तान में जो तालिबान वाला इशू है, ठीक है, अफगानिस्तान से, इट वुड हैव बीन द सेम वे. तो अगर कोई ये कह रहे कि कुछ डिफरेंट होता या फिर हम पीसफुली रहते, ऐसा कभी नहीं होना था. इसी तरह सिचुएशन, it was always going to become like this because we were not no more in a kingdom system, we were in a parliament system. ठीक है, तो फिर रूलिंग पार्टी होती, वोटिंग होती एंड एवरीथिंग, एंड दिस वाज गोइंग टू ऑलवेज एंड अप लाइक दिस. सो वो पीपल हु से कि ओ हम अगर इंडिया के साथ, अगर पाकिस्तान इंडिया एक होते, व्हिच वुड नॉट इंक्लूड द बलोचिस्तान एंड केपी साइड स्पेशली, it would have still turned out the same. Maybe there was a possibility that you would have not gotten the same kind of rivalry as you get from the Afghanistan, and Iran, but in situation in the subcontinent would have been the same way you're seeing it right now.
Why would it be the
I
same?
would
Because
I would like to
imagine the resources and the
yeah,
money,
so
the
I would
effort of.
like
So
to
you're only thinking on the side that because Pakistan is financially not doing that well. So give me a second.
No, what resources does Pakistan have? Like, what do they
No,
have?
I'm
Oil?
saying
Do they
it's
have
नहीं
gold?
the
Do
in
they
the
एक
have
past
सेकेंड हाँ
diamonds?
70
देखो
years,
देखो
all
इसके
the
अंदर ना one second देखो I've noticed there are three kinds of people who actually think that the partition and the
Acha,
whole hunky dory
I
thing.
just want to add one thing. Shaji, एक second. Sorry, my sister was here, so I couldn't speak. The thing is कि ठीक है, financially, if you say resources and all that, it would have been a different situation. Pakistan wouldn't exist. We would be part of an economy like India. But that does not change the situation of normal basic people, right? I mean, are you saying that Muslims in India are doing much better because now India is doing much better economically? That's not the case. They have their issues. There are problems there. There is a RSS and Muslim issues, right? Even if we say not all of the Hindus are like that, I agree. Not all Hindus are like that. I have many Hindu friends who are good people from India, but there is that thing there, right? There is there is the cow lynching, there is the singing songs in front of the mosques and stuff. These things exist, and it would have been a lot of it would have been there. I mean, I would actually say that the Hindus that are treated in Pakistan, that is wrong as well. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but it was not a good for decision for the Muslims, at least. That's how I see it. I mean, now that I look
I
at
think,
the
like,
situation,
the right answer is that, we don't know what would have happened because it did not happen and we would never know.
no,
So
Aditya,
to
it would
say
have been
that,
the same
it would have been a
way.
great
Aditya,
thing
it would
or
have
the
been the same
worst thing
way.
is just ideas and imaginations. We would never know.
आदित्य
Like,
देखो, मेरी
it could
बात
have
सुनो.
gone either ways.
Yeah,
Yeah,
No,
I'm
no, no,
not
no,
exactly,
no,
saying
no.
it could
आदित्य
have
मेरी
gone
बात
either
सुनो.
way.
एक सेकंड
and
शाजी,
and
एक
it
सेकंड, एक सेकंड. आदित्य, एक सेकंड शाजी. आदित्य देखो, जो पहले था, जो ब्रिटिश से पहले था, that was वहां पे kingdoms थे, राज्य थी, there were kings who generally did not care about the religion of their subjects. ठीक है, they were the same, they treated everyone the same. ठीक है. Then came the British, and then we got the parliamentary system. ठीक है, we were never going back to the kingdom system. We got the parliament from British. ठीक है. It was always going to become like this because now this is a war of parties. Like, let's just be honest, BJP plays the Hindu victim card just to win votes. ठीक है. So this was always going to turn out like this.
Okay, can I speak?
yeah, if you notice there are we can talk about what would have happened and what could have happened and what would have been the resultant and there but I've noticed there's only like three kind of people who basically put a lot of thought into that. The extremely religious ones who believe in some kind of dogma. For example, there would be Muslims who want Ghazwa Hind and they want to go back to the ruling class, or Hindu Rashtra people who want to have Akhand Bharat and who want to create a Hindu Rashtra. Then there is a group of people who talk about this. These are communities which are either directly affected by the partition or religiously or ethnically speaking. For example, you would see the Sindhis who have departed from Sindh, or Punjabis who have departed from Punjab. another province which was divided into pieces after the partition, who basically rever what they lost in terms of their ethnic identity, and they believe that they were hard done. And then you've got a third group of people, for example, communities who've been divided into half, whether religiously or in terms of culture. For example, you'll see a lot of Muslims, for example, the Indian Muslims would really want that opportunity, uh, that they would not be such a minority if, for instance, it was united India. And you'll hear a lot of Kashmiris talk about that as well, and they would think that partition is wrong, and I can understand. And again, we have to understand, when one of the things which occurred when Pakistan was created, it left because there are more Muslims left behind in India than those who went with Bangladesh and Pakistan. Pakistan at the time, now divided into two countries, who uh, remained behind. And those people, their elite went to Bangladesh and Pakistan, known as Pakistan at that time, East or West. And most of them came to West. So that community which was left behind of Muslims, if you speak to them, if you look at their sentiments, they were almost left like orphans in terms of survival, in terms of absence of an educated class. The only reason many of them stayed behind is because they could not make a move for one reason or another. So I can again understand where they're coming from. But then there is, once you've like clarified this entire situation, then there are those who basically just, like, for example, like to compare cricket teams. They like to compare resources, and they think everything would have been hunky dory in this situation. What I think specifically those people, as well as the previously dissected group, what they fail to understand is, if, for example, India would have been united, let's just think about that for a second. The Afghanistan issue would have been an even bigger issue with the Taliban and everything else, because that would have not involved Pakistan, that would have involved entire Indian Muslim populace. The Afghan issue would have been an Indian issue. So again, if you look at the entire situation, the hard elements within Pakistan in terms of religious extremism would have gone head to head with the Hindu extremism. And what does that remind me of? That reminds me of all the times in previous history, which predates the British in the subcontinent, where there are stories of conflict between Muslims and Hindus. Uh, some people refer to them as invaders. That would have been such a common thing even in today's world. So I
Can I
think
quickly respond to
overall,
that?
one more thing. I think overall, Pakistan is kind of not purposely made in that way, but Pakistan seems to be like a buffer state for India. Otherwise, the Afghan and the Iranian issues would have been Indian issues. And
I think
with
Shah,
such a, yeah, go ahead.
I think we should do another room about, like, was partition a good thing or a bad thing, and to, like, just you made a very quick statement that Afghan Taliban would have been India's problem. I think, like, I could agree with a lot of things that you said, but not this exact point, because the Afghan Taliban is created by Pakistan. It would have never existed if it wasn't for Pakistan. So it would have never been a problem, to be honest. Like, Afghanistan Taliban would have never existed without the support of Pakistan. So it can be a longer discussion. We can discuss about it.
Aditya,
But yeah.
Aditya,
I
the
could
thing
I
is,
speak,
no, yeah, after
Shaji?
this, yeah,
I
just
I
one
asked
second.
earlier also.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry about that, Neil. Aditya, the thing is, it's very well saying that whose ideology it was, and people quote it was Saudis, whose funding it was, and people quote it was American. And it's very easy to state that it was Pakistan who provided the base. And yeah, I can understand that. But the situation, given the same circumstances, the same Soviet attack, the same conditions as per remaining the same in that situation, the radicalization and things like that would have been just as bad. The Iranian Revolution would have still emerged. The Saudis and the oil issues would have still been there, and what was happening
The
in
only
Central Asia.
reason the Arabs and the Americans were able to infiltrate in Afghanistan was through Pakistan. They would have never been even able to enter Afghanistan if it wasn't for Pakistan. So
Have you heard of
that's my
the
understanding.
word?
Okay, guys, I think we are going into a lot of ifs and
Yeah, yeah.
buts.
Just hold
Yeah.
on for by one second. If you refer back to what is known as the Great Game, this is exactly what happened between Russia and Britain in the same region. And if you look even before that, that's exactly what happened. Each time there was a conflict in Afghanistan and Iran or Central Asia in terms of empires emerging or dropping. Uh, this was the corridor from which, and it still remains to be the corridor which from where people entered, historically speaking. So nothing's changed in the Pakistan Afghan, what is known as Pakistan today, and
I
Afghanistan
totally
border.
disagree with you there. We can discuss about what was happening in Afghanistan in that period, and you'll be surprised. Trust me, you'll be surprised what exactly was happening in the 70s and the
I
80s.
I think
Start beginning in the
I'm not
50s.
talking about the
We can
set.
have a
Do you know
separate
where
discussion about
I'm
it.
talking about the 18th century? I think we're talking about completely different periods. I'm talking about the 18th, 19th century. The Great Game was 18th, 19th century, and the period you're referring to, and
So
those
India would have
pictures.
supported, silently
Guys,
would
we
have
really need to
supported
move on
the
from
Yeah,
this. This topic is
we
not
need
about
to.
Yeah,
India and
I
Pakistan.
yeah, I think Neo has
because
been
India
waiting
would have
for quite some
silently
Yeah,
time.
supported the
Neo,
Soviets,
please.
and
Let's go to
they
Neo.
would have
Neo,
been
please go
successful
ahead.
to creating a Soviet state in Afghanistan.
Yeah,
ठीक है
yeah, Neo, please go ahead.
हाँ चलो मैं final Gordon, I guess you guys want to talk about Gandhi and stuff, so that's fine. So, in my opinion, that's of course I could be wrong. It's just my opinion. Agar Pakistan, we're doing English, right? Okay, so if Pakistan and India never had the partition, I would imagine. Uh, See, right now, the reason you're saying that Muslims in India are persecuted and all that, also because they are a very small minority, right? And Pakistan is a majority Muslim. Imagine if India and Pakistan was not split, it was just one country. Muslims would have like what 30%, 40% representation, 30 to 40% representation in the whole of India. So they would have way more political power than what they have right now. So this persecution, oh, because the Muslims are so small in minority, they are being persecuted. They would have more political power than they have right now in India. And same thing with Pakistan. Pakistan, all the resources in the past 70 years that they wasted in defense and being uh, prepared to fight from India and always being this, all the situations that has happened in Pakistan, they wouldn't have to had to deal with it. They would have a combined resources between India and Pakistan to be successful, and Bangladesh all together. Of course, later on they could have had a civil war, whatever. I'm not talking about that. This is just my idea that they would have a much better chance at becoming a superpower, at becoming a much more bigger footprint in the whole entire globe than what it is by being split. And now India and Pakistan are at each other's throat. They are competitors. Bangladesh is competitor with India and Pakistan, and they are working against each other in that sense, instead of pooling their resources and actually getting to something. So that's just my opinion about it. Of course you might disagree, that's fine. We can agree to disagree, but yeah, you can go ahead and talk about Gandhi and stuff. Go ahead.
Just last two words I'll say is that if we are not being able to do it with 1.4 billion people, we wouldn't have been able to do it with 1.8 billion people.
No, I'm saying a unity. I mean, being together in India itself, not
Did you
1.8
get my
billion.
point? If we
No, as a
if we
not
are
as a
not
ummah. We are
if
not
we are
talking
not
about
able to
as a
do it
yeah.
with 1.4 billion people, we wouldn't have been able to do it with 1.8 billion people. So that's my
No, but
answer to that.
with the two with the combined, you wouldn't have the wastage of so much resources in the past 60 years on each other. You know how much time and energy is spent being competitive with each other, India and Pakistan, and
Again, I think that is ill-informed facts. The thing is, if you look at how much India has spent on Pakistan or defense against Pakistan compared to their entire spend, that doesn't even come into double figures.
Yeah,
And
we
when you
still
look
would
at,
have
but the
needed
only
only,
country that
yeah,
India has
hold
actually
on,
fought
hold
wars with
on.
is Pakistan.
Yeah, so please, देसी नियो आप थोड़ा सा ना रिटोरिक से बाहर निकल के कभी फैक्ट्स के ऊपर गौर फरमाएंगे ना, तो ना पाकिस्तान का सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम इंडिया है, ना इंडिया का सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम पाकिस्तान है। पाकिस्तान का सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम जहाँ पे वो 40 साल से ऑफ एंड ऑन लड़ रहा है, वो अफ़गान बॉर्डर है। दैट
और
इज़ नॉट
इंडिया के
इवन
लिए वो
इंडिया।
चाइना है।
हाँ,
इंडिया
और
के लिए
इंडिया
चाइना
के
है।
लिए वो चाइना है। और अगर आप रिसोर्सेज़ को देखो, हाउ मच हैव दे स्पेंट इन टर्म्स ऑफ डिफेंस अगेंस्ट ईच अदर? इट इज़ मिनिमल टू द अमाउंट ऑफ
Yeah,
spent
2 to 3%
Pakistan has
of the
made.
total
Yeah,
GDP. Do you think we would have become
exactly.
with 3%? We would have become a superpower like America.
ये ना ऐसे ही हमारे लोगों को बेवकूफ़ बनाया जाता है कि इस टाइप की चीज़ें हैं। पाकिस्तान की तो जंग ही 40 साल से अफ़गान बॉर्डर के
Anyways, we
ऊपर
would
हो
have
रही है।
needed an army to
हुँ।
station towards Iran or Afghanistan or still China or Myanmar. We would still have spent like 2 to 3% on the army.
It probably
Either
would have
ways,
been harder if I look at it from
yeah.
the Indian perspective. It would have been even harder because then you've got these huge problems, the Afghan problem, the Iranian Revolution problem, and then China. Can you imagine that?
And
1947, when the British left, India wasn't even manufacturing a needle by themselves, right? So to save, to start from something like not even being able to produce a needle to becoming a superpower was anyways impossible. Like it's wishful thinking, but it's not anything close to the reality. Let's I think it's a good point to end the
I
discussion.
think the
Okay, I
expenditure on defense is a actual is an important expenditure for any of the countries, and I don't think it is going to be a reason for the downfall of some country if they are increasing their defense expenditure. I don't think that can be a reason for the downfall.
Yeah, that's why I said, if we are not been able to do it with 1.4 billion people, we wouldn't have been able to do it with 1.8 billion people. Pakistan doesn't have oil, it doesn't have gold, it doesn't have diamonds, it doesn't have any special natural resources. It's just any other country. We can be emotional about it, that about the Hindutva and Akhand Bharat. It's like it's a good thing to wish everybody comes together, but let's also fact the reality that nothing would have been exceptionally different. It could have gone either ways. That's my understanding. It could have gone a lot worse. Look at what happened in Sudan. The North Sudan and the South Sudan, they had civil wars. They literally smashed each other's heads because of religion. One were Christians and the other were Muslims. They literally smashed each other's heads. Millions of people died, and today it's one of the poorest countries in the planet. They don't have even drinking water. So it could have gone either way. So let's not say that it would have been India would have become superpower, and we would have living peacefully, Hindu Muslim bhai bhai. I think the answer is we would never know. So it could have gone either ways.
okay. I think whether
So
you're
the
pro or anti partition, we are still going on
Yeah,
about
yeah.
like
So we're
what ifs
moving
and
on from
buts.
there.
So yeah, let's move
Yeah.
on.
So,
Jishan.
so, so the question over here is coming back to the entire situation. It was very interesting. Naimaji got disconnected. She's trying to log in again, but she was the one who raised a few points. Or before that, it was Ishika. Now, the thing is, for example, it's said that Gandhi was pro-partition. It is also said that so the partition doesn't occur, uh, he was very cordial with Jinnah. He wanted to appease him, and as far it is also said by certain segments that Gandhi could not believe that partition occurred, and he said that he is not going to abide by the partition. And as far as he's concerned, he's going to go to both of the divided parts and consider it to be a single country. And apparently, that was something which he was considering a visit to Pakistan or something, and that is when he was kind of killed by, just before that, he was killed by Nathuram Godse. Now, the question is, regardless of all the conspiracy theories on both sides, that he was a appeaser or a proponent of, part and parcel proponent of the entire partition, or he opposed partition. The fact of the matter is that there are some facts which we can look at in terms of how and in which circumstances and in which situation did Gandhi basically become a leader. And some of the things which are extremely interesting are that his incidents which some incidents which occurred with him while he was in South Africa. Now, the one of the main questions which I have in regards to that is that incident. He was a normal lawyer of that time, right? And that incident occurred just on a bus. So how comes when Gandhi returns, it was not the time of social media that the stories would have like flourished or everything. There were hundreds of people who went to receive him. Who were those people? Who had told those people that there is a man who is Gandhi, who is coming back from South Africa. He now stands up for his people. He is a activist, and he is your future hero. And God behold, the answer is it was the British press, on behest of whom? None other than the British government. So they had been promoting him for months in terms of highlighting that incident. So by the time Gandhi returned to India, and if you look at the pictures of that time, if you look at the newspaper clippings of that time, he was already made or turned into a hero by the British press. So that is what a lot of people, and that is a hard fact if you think about it, right? Use in regards to stating that he was cordial to the Brits. On top of that, one of the first things which Gandhi did when he came back with his newly found popularity is he was contacted by the British to fight the Nazis um, in the Second World War, just before the Second World War, when the situation for recruitment purposes, and he basically endorsed recruitment of local people who happen to be people of the subcontinent to join the British Army against anyone who opposes them. Now that again is a huge kind of a contradiction, if you ask me. That if, for example, and Aditya, I would like your insight in this, or Furqan, or Medusa, or Ishika, of course. How can you claim? My question is, how do you balance the two things out? On one side, you want freedom, and I understand. What you're basically stating is the fact that you're against violence, but how can you outrightly go and advocate for such a thing?
So are you saying that he wanted Indians to join the British army because he wanted Indians to work for the British in defense of other superpowers? It could be multiple reasons,
I am not suggesting that. That is what some other people.
can you I think there's a problem with your internet, Shah.
No, there is a problem with his mic. It's muting and unmuting on its own.
Unmuting.
Shachi,
Yeah,
can you
so it could be anything. If you can share any article about it, it could be probably he thought that the Britishers were uh, better colonizer than other colonizers, because if you compare the Britishers with the likes of the Japanese, they were horrendous. If you compare them with other even European colonizers, they were at least somewhat better than the others, right? And it could be totally false statement. I don't know. I haven't heard about it, to be very honest with you. If you can share any article about it, I can read about it. But to say that just because he asked the people to join the British army implies that he was a British stooge. That's we don't know what was the reason behind it, or was it even true that he actually did ask. I don't know.
I think he was asking that how did Gandhi gained such popularity, because that era was not an
Hello,
era of.
Karan.
Hello, Ji. Hello. How are you?
so
Hi
so
Karan, how are you doing?
what are your views about Mahatma Gandhi? How do you view him? Do you think he was a complex personality, or do you think he was a good person, or do you think he was a evil guy, or how do you view him in India's context?
एक second. Let Ishika complete, then Karan can join in after that. Ishika, go on.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think if I heard it right, so the question was that how did Gandhi get the popularity, and how, like, the journey of becoming father of the nation, right? If I'm not wrong, Shaji.
Yes. So just before he became, what was the reason of his popularity, and why do I see? Was it a thing? Were the Brits afraid of him? That is why they were covering him, or if that was the case, they would have only covered him in the UK or Africa. Why was this stage being built even before he had returned to from South Africa? Is very interesting question, and that's not something which I have an opinion on in terms of a conclusive one, or why he recruited people or endorsed the British Army, like I said. But these are some of the points which people who are radically against him like point out, and these are hard facts. So they are worth thinking about, if you know what I mean. Go ahead, Isha.
I think, as far as I know, like according to my limited knowledge, it was the Satyagraha after which he gained much of his popularity. He was opposing the Rowlatt Acts, where the Britishers could imprison anyone without a trial for the suspect of sedition. So I think the Satyagraha movement in the 1990s was the first movement where he gained much of the popularity, and after that is it was like a chain of movements going on. Then came the civil disobedience movement, and the massacre in the Amritsar also happened. So like he actually became kind of a, you can say, a huge political figure after the Satyagraha movement.
No, but Ishika, my argument is, and what the facts show, and first of all, I think you said it incorrectly. Not 1918, 90s, not 1990s. People are going to
No,
like,
1919, 1919.
yeah, 1919 is much
Yeah.
later. So Gandhi, when he traveled to South Africa, was 1893, Ishika,
Mhm.
and he returned in 1915, and that's when he basically began to advocate. So what The time period you're referring to is much later on. That's 4 years after that. On his return, if you look at the headlines from that time period, and if you look at the amount of people who went to receive him, that is very interesting. That a person who's suffered from an incident in South Africa, a normal run of the mill person, okay, a bit upper class, very extremely educated, he returns and he's received as a leader by hundreds of people. How? How do they know about him? Why do they know about him? And why is the British government allowing that? Do you understand? Especially when there is a lot of other movements which have begun to show up in form of cracks, and that is what the RSS or right wing people or anti-Gandhi people usually bring up. That's one of the primary points they bring up.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
So I think, like, the people who have, like, read about his time in South Africa would know that he was kind of a activist back in Africa, South Africa too. So let's remember that the Indians who were working in South Africa, or the people who got a formal education in England, were not any kind of ordinary people. Like the likes of Jinnah and the likes of Gandhi, all these people who studied in, like, England, were, like, the elite of the elitist people from South Asia or India. In those times, they were, like, just imagine that, not more than a few thousand people were able to study in England during the British era. Just couple of thousand people, or not more, not even more than, like, couple of thousand people were able to study in England under the British education system. So back also in when he was in South Africa, his ideas of non-violent, uh, peaceful, like, non-compliance, his ideas began in South Africa when he was thrown out of the first class train. He resisted, like, he also wanted a lot of rights for the Indian people. Again, a racist reason, because he thought that the Britishers treated Indians as they treated the blacks. So he wanted more rights for the Indian people, because he somehow thought that the brown Indians were somehow better than the black Africans. So, like, his ideas were gathering popularity. He wasn't a nobody even before he entered India. He was a very popular guy, and his ideas were very, very, like, non-compliance. They were, like, appreciated. Even just imagine, so British, even the British era, even England wasn't, like, all the people were on one page. It was a time, the industrial age, and even in back in England, was a very oppressive period for the Britishers itself. Like, from miners were working in the mines, coal mines, and all these mines. You had people working like 16 to 18-hour shifts in a day. So even, like, the people, they used to write about him. There was already a lot of things written about his ideas, so he was already a pretty popular guy. And when he came back to India, he wasn't a nobody. So to say that the Britishers planted him is a bit of a stretch.
No, no, I'm not.
Maybe
I'm not the one. I'm just bringing in the other side of the argument.
so
So
that's my
Aditya,
that's my, like, you
yeah,
can read
but
about, he did
Aditya,
many
so
kind of peaceful
so
protest
Aditya,
in
would
South
you
Africa.
consider
So
if you
that's the
look at
answer.
the no, but if you look at the family backgrounds, or in terms of the eliteness, would you say that at least Jinnah and Nehru, in terms of their family background, were kind of on par with Gandhi, and when they
Yes, they
returned,
were.
yeah, but when they returned, they did not receive any such kind of
Yeah, because they did
negative
not had a background of,
reception.
like, 20 years working as a lawyer in South Africa, where Gandhi got a lot of his popularity in South Africa, where he, like, multiple he did multiple protest and non-compliance, like, protest for the blacks and even mostly for the Indians who were working in South Africa. You know that still
So
South
what
Africa is
was
a big.
so that's we've come to a very imperative part. So do you realize, like, for over 20 odd years when he was in South Africa, the kind of cases he was fighting, and the way he was actually leading a situation uh, before that incident occurred? Do you realize that he was awarded various awards, not just one or two. He was bestowed with various kinds of awards and various kinds of luxury items by, again, on behest of the British government, British Empire, for
Yeah,
being a
because he was
loyal
working for
subject.
the British in South Africa. He was working for the British. But he wanted more rights for the people. He was also jailed for his
So why
for
was
his
he
protest.
thrown
He was
out?
in jail for
Why
3 or 6 months.
so my question is, so according to Gandhi, a lot of people have basically pointed that out as well, that Gandhi did not entirely leave South Africa on his own will. The situation was that his working paperwork was kind of terminated and he was left with no choice. If that is the case, and the reason behind that was that he was being chaotic to, apparently being chaotic to the British government and the way they rule, and the authorities did not like him. So why would they send him to a more flourishing area of their empire, even though he was indigenous to India, where the issues had already begun to spring up? That's the second thing which comes to mind. They should have like abstained him from coming to India altogether, because if he's becoming such an issue in South Africa, he would be worse in India, where he would be able to relate to people culturally. He would be able to speak to people in a more convincing tone, and he can be much more disastrous. You have to understand, India compared to Africa, or South Africa in that case, was much more uh, lucrative. So the question is, why would an authority who have an issue with somebody in a non relatively stable part of their empire send him to a more volatile and more destructive place if he was so destructive and against them? Aditya, Ishika, Karan, Medusa, anyone? That is a very important question.
I think
I think,
if Karan
Karan
wants
bhai, yeah, Karan bhai, if you would like to respond.
Thank you, yaar. There's a guy called Abhishek Anand. I think Abhishek को ज्यादा पता है. अभिषेक, अगर आप आ सकते हैं माइक लेके तो आप अपना ज्ञान दें हमें भी. I think Shadi and to all of the panels, मेरा तो ये शादी की बात, I think 90% is right. Gandhi ji absolutely is a byproduct of Britishers. तब वो उनको इस्तेमाल करते थे जब जब उनकी जरूरत पड़ती थी. एंड मूविंग फॉरवर्ड, अब देखिए, अगर आप इसको ध्यान से देखें तो गांधी जी ब्रिटिशर्स के लिए एक एस्केप गोट भी है. कारण ये है कि दुनिया को बताते हैं कि देखो जी, गांधी जी वहां पे वो लाठी लेके खड़े हो गए थे, तो हम डर गए, तो हम सब छोड़ के आगे वापस. अब हम लोग यहाँ पे बैठ के वी कैन गिव आवर ओपिनियंस, हम अपने विचार दे सकते हैं, पर दुनिया में तो नैरेटिव एक सेट कर दिया ना उन्होंने, अंग्रेजों ने. अब दुनिया की जितनी बड़ी यूनिवर्सिटीज हैं, अमेरिका की, ब्रिटेन की, या कहीं भी, लाइक कनाडा या यूरोप की भी काफी हद तक, वहां पे गांधी के बारे में पढ़ाया जाता है, ब्रिटिश स्कूल में पढ़ाया जाता है कि एक होती है रियलिटी, एक होता है नैरेटिव. तो ये जो गांधी कैरेक्टर है, ये अंग्रेजों को बहुत सूट करता है, और अंग्रेजों को इसलिए सूट करता है कि देखो जी, हम तो लड़े नहीं वहां पे, किसी को मारा भी नहीं। गांधी जी ने वहां पे आंदोलन कर दिया, सत्याग्रह कर दिया, तो हमने कहा भाई ठीक है, आपका राइट है, आप चले जाओ। और वही नैरेटिव आज तक इंडिया ढो रहा है, गांधी वाला। वो जो अभी फार्मर प्रोटेस्ट हुए थे, या जो वो भी प्रोटेस्ट होता है, वो क्या होता है इंडिया में, वो सड़कों पे आके बैठ जाते हैं गांधी स्टाइल। तो वो इट्स काइंड ऑफ अब उनकी अगर आप देखें गांधी जी की हिस्ट्री, तो वो, अगर देखा जाए तो वो अपना मकसद तो पूरा नहीं कर पाए। शांति वो नहीं लेके आ सके, क्योंकि अगर शांति लेके आ सकते तो बंटवारा होता तो 10 लाख लोग मरते। 10 लाख लोग भी मर गए, बंटवारा भी हो गया, फिर भी गांधी जी शांति के वो प्रतीक है। गांधी जी की बात क्या कहते हैं, अंबेडकर माने, पटेल साहब माने, बट गांधी जी की बात हमारे जिन्होंने तो मानी नहीं। वो कहते हैं आप अपने आइडिया अपने पास ही रखो। तो इट्स इट्स काइंड ऑफ, एक तो है हमारा लाइक नो पीपल फ्रॉम सब कॉन्टिनेंट, हमारा एक अपना ओपिनियन है। एक जो दुनिया ने नैरेटिव सेट कर दिया ना फुरकान भाई, वो नेक्स्ट लेवल पे ही चले गए। तो वो तो उसको बेचते हैं गांधी को, ये भी है, या यूके में भी है, और कई जगह पे भी है। वो कहते हैं देखो ये तो, इससे तो हम डर के आ गए, ये तो डंडा लेके खड़ा हो गया था। सो इट्स अ पर्सन नाउ, आप उसको जिस तरीके से अपने हिसाब से यूज करना चाहें कर सकते हैं, बट उसकी अब जो पॉलिटिकल जो उसका गेन, जो उसने गेन करना था, वैसे गांधी जी कह के गए थे कि अब भारत आजाद हो गया कि कांग्रेस पार्टी को बंद कर देना चाहिए। वो किसी ने सुना नहीं। उन्होंने कहा था कि कांग्रेस शुड बी क्लोज नाउ। बट इट्स अ बिग पर्सनालिटी। आज के हमारे टाइम पे जो हम लोग, हमसे पहले की जो टाइम, जो जनरेशन थी, ऑलमोस्ट एवरीबडी नोज हिम इन द वर्ल्ड। अब अब रियलिटी क्या है, अंग्रेज क्यों भागे, बाकी दुनिया सारी जहाँ जहाँ अंग्रेजों की हुकूमत थी, श्रीलंका में, मलेशिया का गांधी कहाँ पे है, यू नो। जैसे एक राइट विंग का वो पूछते हैं वो लोग कि जो अपना इजिप्ट के गांधी जी कहाँ पे हैं। तो दीज काइंड ऑफ थिंग्स आर देयर, बट नाउ वो इतनी बड़ी पर्सनालिटी बन गए हैं, उनको हैंडल करना कोई आसान काम नहीं है। इट्स इट्स काइंड ऑफ, जैसे आप कह लें कि एक क्या डार्विन थ्योरी, आप अपने उसके उसके ऊपर नेगेटिव ओपिनियन दुनिया में दे ही नहीं सकते हैं। अगर आप अपनी ओपिनियन दें उसके खिलाफ, तो दुनिया आपके पीछे पड़ जाती है, तो आप तो साइंटिफिक माइंड ही नहीं है। तो नैरेटिव जो उन्होंने इतना बड़ा बिल्ड कर दिया है, उसको तोड़ना तो आई डोंट थिंक सो इट्स पॉसिबल एट द मिनट। बाकी आपकी बातें मैं सुन रहा था काफी, एक्चुअली यार आई वाज रनिंग लेट, मैंने आपको पहले मैसेज किया था, सो दैट्स व्हाई। एंड
करण भाई, एक एक बात मुझे बताएं। आई आई अंडरस्टैंड योर सेंटिमेंट कि वो एक नैरेटिव बन चुका है। गांधी इज वेरी मच पार्ट ऑफ द सोशल फैब्रिक ऑफ इंडिया। आई थिंक देयर इज नो वन currently living in India who did not grow up with that kind of mindset. Then why all of a sudden we see the praise of God say, we see all these facts come out, we're listening to all these things emerge। ये सारे चीज़ें आप ये हमारे कमेंटेटर्स के अंदर भी देख लें, अभिषेक साहब कोई बैठे हुए हैं और लोग भी जो हैं, they're basically stating the same thing. Now, if you look at a term जहाँ पे आप एक central figure को, या demonizing of Nehru in various ways, it seems to me that there is this emergence. What is the mindset behind that?
अब देखिए
What is the
सारी,
reason behind that?
अब लाइक यू नो, जैसे कहते हैं कि हर कहानी के दो पहलू होते हैं, राइट। अब ये जो है, गांधी जी बड़े अच्छे हैं, शांति प्रिय हैं, वो लाइक नॉन वायलेंस है, ये है वो है। उस समय का मीडिया नैरेटिव अंग्रेजों का था, तो उनका चलाया हुआ कि हाँ जी गांधी जी तो बहुत अच्छे थे, गांधी जी लाइक नो ऑलवेज आफ्टर द पीस एंड एवरीथिंग। अब देश जो अब आजाद है आफ्टर 75 years, पीपल हैव राइट टू गिव देयर ओन ओपिनियन आल्सो। अब वो भी अपनी ओपिनियन रखते हैं, तो नहीं जी हमारे विचार में ये ऐसे है। तो टेक्निकली अगर देखा जाए, इसी को तो फ्रीडम ऑफ स्पीच बोलेंगे ना, कि बोथ साइड अलाउड टू स्पीक। जिनका नैरेटिव अब जो लोगों को ज्यादा सूट करता है, ये तो आप मानेंगे ना यार, आप सबकी गांधी जी फेल टू पीस डील तो करवा नहीं पाए ना। पीस डील होती तो फिर शांति के इतने प्रतीक थे तो बंटवारा ना करने देते, ना मरते लोग इतने, फेल हो गए वहां पे। तो बेसिकली व्हाट ही प्रीच ही डिडंट प्रैक्टिस। यहाँ अगर बंटवारा ना होता, लोग इतने ना मरते, फिर हाँ गांधी जी का फिर कोई वो नहीं था ना। तो गांधी जी ने वोट एवर ही सेड, हाँ जी उन्होंने मनवा लिया। उन्होंने कहा कि जिन्ना जी को नहीं जी डेमोक्रेसी रहेगी, आप अपनी अपनी पॉइंट रखें अपने पार्टी का, पीपल चाहे आपको वोट करें ना करें, वो भी नहीं वो कर पाए। और फिर उसके बाद काफी ऐसे इंसिडेंट्स है, जैसे भगत सिंह जी के टाइम पे उनके पास अपॉर्चुनिटी थी उनकी मदद करने की, वो नहीं की। ये तो चलो छोटी छोटी बात, छोटी तो नहीं है, इट्स अ बिग थिंग, बट इन द स्केल ऑफ इंडियन फ्रीडम
तो करण भाई, आपका क्या पर्सनली ओपिनियन है अबाउट गांधी जी? यूर फ्रॉम इंडिया, you are basically
आई
somebody from
पर्सनली,
India.
या आई वुड आल्सो से ही फेल्ड टू सेल द प्रोडक्ट। मतलब वो जो उन्होंने कहा वो कर तो नहीं पाए ना उसमें। या तो कर देते, या तो लोग इतने ना मरते ना शादी, फिर एंड ऑफ द डे इनोसेंट पीपल डाइड।
No, but do you put his achievement के इतने लोग मर गए इस चक्कर के अंदर इस तरह हुआ? Would you say कि एक बंदा अगर पीसफुल रहना चाहता है, just like being fair in the discussion to both
अगर वो
sides,
मास लीडर होते,
तो even if he failed,
यस यस यस,
तो आप उस बंदे को तो गलत नहीं कह सकते थे। तो
नो
लोगों की
व्हाई नॉट।
गलती है ना कि उन्होंने उस तरह किया। If he was an advocate of peace and he
हाँ हाँ, वो तो
failed,
मैं मानता
that
हूँ,
doesn't make him a bad person, right?
आई
The
एम
the
नॉट,
issue,
आई हैवंट यूज्ड, मैंने अभी तक बैड का तो शब्द का प्रयोग नहीं किया है।
well, he failed. You can say he failed.
हाँ
I
ही
would
फेल्ड,
agree
या
with
उसका
that.
तो मैं
Yeah.
उससे तो आई थिंक एनीबॉडी वुड एग्री विद दैट कि हाँ जी वो
Mm.
No, I don't agree with that. Like, it's not that simple. He did a lot of things where he did succeed. So, but I think to say that he failed is a very narrow understanding of his ideas.
No, no, he means in terms of like if we were to consider that he was all about peace or a non-violence, but the partition was anything but non-violent.
But that's assuming if you believe that he wanted partition. But like then you have to prove that he wanted
तो फिर
partition.
यार वो आदित्य, पहली बात तो ये कि ना
Chalo,
वो
chalo, let's rephrase that. He was an advocate for the Brits to leave the subcontinent, and he wanted that to be a peaceful process. It didn't occur that
ये
way.
तो बहुत शादी बाद में हुआ है। जो कांग्रेस पार्टी की जो बुनियाद है ना, वो रखी अंग्रेज ने है। इट वाज इंग्लिश गाय हु जो उसने कांग्रेस पार्टी की शुरुआत की थी।
पता
और
है
ये
क्या,
तो
इस चीज के ऊपर ना करण भाई, अभी पहले भी हम चले गए थे। आई थिंक वी नीड टू स्केड्यूल समथिंग इन कमिंग वीक्स।
मेरे
हाँ,
कहने का मतलब ये है भाई कि देखो, अगर आप उस टाइम का माहौल भी, अगर आप चलो एनीवे यार, दिस इज अ न्यू गाय हार्ड टाइम्स, अगर वो कुछ कहना चाहे मैं तो बोल ही रहा हूँ।
Nahin, Karan bhai, I don't think we have more time to take more people. We'll discuss
आई थिंक वी
further
स्टिल गॉट
यार
10
लेकिन
20
about the
एक एक
मिनट्स।
बंदा
ideas
आया, उससे
next
बात
time.
तो कर
उससे
लेने
बात
दो ना।
करें
ही
आप।
इज ऑन स्टेज, उसे बात कर लेने दो। हार्ड
Let's
देन
take
विल
a quick closing point from hard
हाँ
times
जी,
and then we close the discussion.
हार्ड टाइम्स गो है।
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I'll just keep it very quick. I think his assassination, post the independence, right? I mean, that was basically then after used big time by Congress. It just makes it a real good story, right? Very Jesus like, right? The guy just became a martyr, and then it was used by Congress then after for 20, 30 years, continuous propaganda, millions of dollars invested in making, curating this image, and just made this whole thing very, you know, uh, like, just the whole story narrative became super strong, in his favor. I think, that just made him larger than life. Then the Gandhi movie was there, right? I mean, the West, in the West, it became very popular. Just brought him to the center stage, and then Martin Luther King, and there's so much that happened, right? I mean, yeah, so all those things kind of added up to create this larger than life. I mean, he was big leader, but then again, like all these things just added up. So I think he, like the one thing I would blame Godse for is there was like a huge mistake, just killing. I know he was completely unhinged and made a lot of compromises, especially when it came to the interest of India. But like killing him was kind of a turning point that then after was used by Congress to project him as Mahatma. His last name was also hijacked by Nehru family then after, and they kept getting using or milking it politically for years and years. So yeah, yeah. I mean that's what I see like Gandhi's legacy as. Thank you.
थैंक यू वेरी मच. हार्ड टाइम्स मैं एक और चीज़ ऐड करना चाहूँगा. एट एवरी सिचुएशन जहाँ पे डिफरेंट पार्टीज और डिफरेंट पॉलिटिकल फोर्सेस और डिफरेंट रिलीजियस ग्रुप काम कर रहे होते हैं, समवन इज़ द बेस्ट फिट इन टर्म्स ऑफ फॉर्मिंग एन इक्विलिब्रियम. और उस टाइम के ऊपर अगर हम देखें तो जो ब्रिटिश थे, दे वर इन अ सिचुएशन जहाँ पे उन्हें पता था कि यूरोपियन कॉन्टिनेंट के अंदर तो एम्पायर्स टूट ही रही हैं, and somehow this is going to occur to their empire as well. The situation, there were revolutions going on, people's revolutions going on everywhere. रशिया के जार जो उस वक्त के किंग का, क्वीन एलिजाबेथ का जो फादर था, उसकी उसका कज़न था. एंड the way things ended, Queen Elizabeth का जो actual husband था, Prince Philip, वो Prince of Greece था. And the same way basically a revolution occurred. तो इनको first hand एक पता भी था कि इस टाइप की चीजें होनी है. So the best fit was not somebody extremist, it was somebody you could talk to. तो अब ये बड़ा आसान है ये कह देना कि गांधी एक स्टूज था या जिना एक स्टूज था या ब्रिटिश एजेंट था. इफ वेर फेयर, हमें एनालाइज ये करना पड़ेगा कि एट दैट टाइम. और दूसरी बात भी ये है कि पाकिस्तान, इंडिया, जिसको अब इस एरिया को चले सब कॉन्टिनेंट कह लेते हैं, यहाँ पे भी डिफरेंट कम्युनिटीज का कोई रिप्रेजेंटेटिव होगा तो उसके ताल्लुकात होंगे, वो कोर्डियल होगा सबके साथ, तभी वो बात करेगा, फिर ही कोई कम्युनिकेशन होगी. सो यू कैन नॉट एक्सपेक्ट कि एक लीडरशिप जिस तरह आज के टाइम में लोग समझते हैं कि हमने फलाने को खामोश करा दिया, वो मेरे आगे बोल नहीं सका, वो उस सिचुएशन को तो आप टेम्परेरीली जीत लेते हैं, बट डिप्लोमेटिकली यू आर नॉट गोइंग टू अचीव नथिंग. If you're going to shout at people, or you're going to kill them, or you're going to say I'm not going to sit on the table and negotiate and converse, then you're going to achieve nothing. वो abstract के अंदर है. And that is why it's stated कि it's the table which resolves the issues. And in order to sit on the table, you have to have a certain amount of relationship. You have to have relationship and communication with your own community who you are basically representing, the sub communities within that, alliances within that, as well as a relationship with the people you are opposing. So part and parcel is तरह की situation में, in terms of diplomacy, some things, if we're fair, personalities like Jinnah or Gandhi or even Nehru or anyone in those times who happened to be successful, and I believe they were successful because that is why चलो उस तरीके से नहीं, कई चीज़ों में वो फेल भी हुए होंगे, बट देयर इज अ रीजन कि भगत सिंह को पूरी दुनिया के अंदर नहीं जाना जाता जितना गांधी को जाना जाता है, या जितना नेहरू को जाना जाता है. तो कोई तो डिफरेंस होगा. और ये जो है जी ज्यादती हो गई और इस तरह हो गया, ये सारी उस तरह की चीजें हैं. गांधी, जिन्ना एंड नेहरू were able to build relationships in terms of conversations on both sides. In not only both of those sides, but other political forces as well. And that is what makes them successful. They were politicians of their time, and that is what leadership is about. It's about communication in many ways. And that is my take on the entire thing. हम यहाँ पे बैठ के दो दो तीन तीन चार चार दिन different
End of the day,
political
Shadi, everybody have the opinion.
एक सेकेंड ना करण भाई, मैं एंड ही कर रहा हूँ तो फिर आप बोल दीजिएगा. डिफरेंट पॉलिटिकल नैरेटिव्स आते हैं और वो जाते हैं, लेकिन हिस्टोरिकली स्पीकिंग जब भी आज से 200 साल 300 साल अगर बॉर्डर्स चेंज भी हो जाते हैं, कल को नहीं भी चेंज होते, these people will remain impacted. They were able to deal with multifaceted political forces, religious forces, in their time, and communicated relatively well. और कभी कोई नहीं साबित कर सकता कि वो किसी के stooge थे या stooge नहीं थे. You're going to find situations जहाँ पे वो controversial लोगों के साथ बैठे होंगे, or you're going to find times, because that's the nature of that job, and there will be times जब आपको नजर आएगा उनकी decisions harsh थी. And that is how I would basically end it. I think it would be wrong to say that Gandhi was a small figure. He or for that matter Nehru or Jinnah, they were very respectable figures, and we have to. मैं क्यों नहीं उस तरह, या आप क्यों नहीं उस तरह करण भाई, या ये जितने लोग आज के पॉलिटिशियंस हैं उनको देख लेते हैं हम. मोदी जी को इतना कभी कोई याद नहीं रखेगा, ना इमरान खान को, ना जुल्फकार अली भुट्टो को. फायरी पॉलिटिशियंस आते हैं जाते हैं, 20 साल के बाद एक माइनॉरिटी उन्हें याद रखती है. इट्स जस्ट अ फैक्ट.
शादी देखिए, मैंने आपको पहले ही आती मेरी ओपनिंग स्टेटमेंट ये थी, क्योंकि गांधी सेल इन द फेवर ऑफ ब्रिटिश, उनके लिए बिकता है, वो उनकी फेवर में बिकता है. वैसे तो पूरी दुनिया में गंद मचा के आए थे, अमेरिका को तो आपको पता ही है, रेस्ट ऑफ द वर्ल्ड, जहाँ पे इनकी कॉलोनी थी, ब्रिटिशर्स ने अकेले हमको तो नहीं गुलाम बनाया था, या हम पे कॉलोनी तो नहीं थी. इट गोज इन द फेवर. उसको तो मैंने आपको पहले ही आके बता दिया कि मैं अकेली जान कहाँ से स्टैनफोर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी के साथ मुकाबला करूंगा या बर्कली के साथ करूंगा. तो वो तो चलता है, वो तो वी ऑल अंडरस्टैंड. उनका प्रोडक्ट था नहीं था, या उनका, हाँ, बट ही फेल्ड टू डिलीवर द गुड्स जब टाइम आया. तो उसमें अगर इतनी वो, हाँ, ऐसे तो हिटलर नहीं भूला जाएगा, ऐसे तो कई लोग हैं दुनिया के जो नहीं भूले जाएंगे. ना भूले जाने का मतलब ये नहीं हुआ कि यू हैव कंट्रीब्यूटेड वेरी ग्रेट आइडियाज टू द वर्ल्ड. ठीक है, वो कईयों को सही लगते हैं, कईयों को गलत लगते हैं, अपनी ओपिनियन है. लेट्स सी व्हिच मेक्स मोर सेंस टू द वर्ल्ड इन कमिंग, लेट्स से अनदर 10 years or 20 years.
Okay, I think we have Vic Singh. Vic, अगर आपका कोई कमेंट है, just
with you, करण भाई, और इसी वजह से ये ब्लैक एंड व्हाइट नहीं होता, और फिर लोग पर्सनल लाइफ्स के बारे में बात करते हैं पॉलिटिशियंस की. None of these people are sacred people. Everyone's going to have some kind of vices. खैर, with that we're about to close. तो उससे पहले Vic Singh has joined us. Vic Singh, please go ahead. आप अपनी बात करें और फिर उसके बाद we'll just go for the closing statements. And thank you very much.
जी सर, आपने अभी वो बंद ही कर रहे, तो मेरी स्टेटमेंट तो कुछ नहीं होगी, या मैं कोई बात करूंगा तो नेक्स्ट टाइम कभी जुड़ते हैं. कर्ण भाजी की हाल ने
गुड विक सिंह, इफ यू वांट, अगर आपने कुछ कहना तो बोल दें यार, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं.
उस पर बात लंबी जाएगी, ब्रिटिश के ऊपर तो बात
नहीं, आप बात करें, कोई मसला नहीं, आप बात करें.
सर जी, ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਦਰਵਾਜ਼ੇ ਖੁੱਲੇ ਨੇ, ਐਸਾ ਕਿਹੜਾ ਮਸਲਾ ਹੈ? ਕਰੋ ਗੱਲ.
ਅੱਛਾ, ਮਸਲੇ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਭਾਜੀ ਬੈਠੇ ਆ ਲਾਹੌਰ ਵਾਲੇ ਹੈ
ਜੀ. ਵੀਰ ਜੀ ਗੱਲ
ਕਰੋ. ਮੈਂ ਹਾਂਜੀ ਕਰਨ ਸਾਹਿਬ, ਮੈਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ, ਪਹਿਲੀ ਗੱਲ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬੜੇ ਟਾਈਮ ਬਾਅਦ ਆਏ ਜੇ ਵਾਪਸ. ਦੂਜੀ ਗੱਲ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਦਾ ਮਸਲਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਨਾ, ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਸਭ ਸਾਡੇ ਖੂਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਉਹ ਹਾਲ ਤੱਕ ਇੱਕ ਹੋਰ 20-25 ਸਾਲ ਰਹਿਣਾ. ਜੋ ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਆਈਡੀਓਲੋਜੀ ਤੇ ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਜੋ ਉਹਨੇ ਪਾਇਆ ਨਾ, ਉਹ ਸਾਡੇ ਖੂਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਾਲ ਤੱਕ ਰਹਿਣਾ 20-25 ਸਾਲ ਹੋਰ. ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਫਿਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਬਣਾਂਗੇ, ਯਾਨੀ ਕਿ ਹਿੰਦੁਸਤਾਨੀ.
ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਗਾਂਧੀ ਜੀ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਕੀ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਹੈ, ਦੱਸੋ. ਗਾਂਧੀ ਜੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਿਦੋਂ ਲੱਗਦੇ?
ਬੜੇ ਅੱਛੇ, ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਅੱਛੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ.
कोई दसो ना
सबको छाड़ता, लेकिन आज तक उन्होंने कि ब्रिटिश का कोई म्यूजियम नहीं छाड़िया, सानू मरवाता।
ये तो तारीफ कर दे पे
मैं तारीफ ही कर रहा था,
यार
सानू मरवाता।
विक सिंह जी मतलब ब्रिटिश तो पहले ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜੱਫੀਆਂ ਪਾ ਕੇ ਬੈਠੇ ਸੋ ਸਾਰੇ
सर जफ्फियां मजबूरी होंदियां, जफ्फी से मजबूरी इन पंजाबी वर्ड कि सानू जफ्फी पाउणी पैनी, क्योंकि क्षेत्र वड्डा हुंदा ना उदों सर हर कोई झुकदा। अच्छा कनेडा ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਖਾਲਸਾਨੀ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਉਹਦਾ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਖੇਤਰ ਉੱਥੇ ਵੱਡਾ, ਉਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਪਰਜਾਓ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ, लेकिन टाइम विल कम फॉर इंडियंस।
चलें ठीक है, इट वाज नाइस स्पीकिंग टू यू विक सिंह जी। इस वीक हम एक रैप अप कर रहे हैं इवेंट खालिस्तान के ऊपर एंड द खालिस्तान मूवमेंट। ये वाला इवेंट तो ख़त्म हो गया, प्लीज़ डू कम इनटू दैट, वी वुड लव टू हैव योर ओपिनियंस। If anyone has closing statements, my statement about Gandhi, I have been very elaborate in terms of that. मैंने तो काफ़ी बता दिया। I just think he was a perfect fit for that time, and that's why he was preferred both by the Brits and a lot of Indians of that time. And he was also somebody, even though with disagreements, the Muslims kind of communicated with, namely Muhammad Ali Jinnah and various others. तो इसी तरह होता है, जो बंदा कम्युनिकेट कर सकता है वही अपने लोगों को रिप्रेजेंट कर सकता है। जो उसके अंदर कुछ लोगों को मसले मसाइल भी होते हैं, बिकॉज नोबडी इज परफेक्ट, और इस तरह का बंदा बड़ा गलत भी हो सकता है। ये भी दे कैन गो एंड सेल द इंटरेस्ट ऑफ देयर पीपल अगर वो बंदा गलत हो। तो इट वर्क्स बोथ वेज, इट्स अ डबल एज स्वॉर्ड। इफ एनीवन एल्स हैज समथिंग टू से प्लीज डू सो, अदरवाइज थैंक यू वेरी मच।
जी सर, मैं एक थोड़ा कमेंट कर दूं कि जब कोई गुलामी होती है ना तो वहां पे कोई वर्क वो नहीं कर सकता, किसी के साथ नहीं कोई शेयर कर सकता अपना वर्क, उसको ऑर्डर मानने पड़ते हैं, वो ऑर्डर को फॉलो करता है और उसके हिसाब से उसको अपनी औकात का पता चलता है। और वही हिसाब हुआ हमारे गांधी और जिन्ना नेहरू उस टाइम की स्टैब्लिश के साथ। तो वो अब तक उनकी वो गलती नहीं है, क्योंकि उनको वो जन्म ही उस हिसाब से मिला कि वो 47 से पहले के जन्मे हुए हैं। वहां पे गौरव गवर्नमेंट थी, वो किसी को उन्होंने स्ट्रगल किया, बहुत अच्छी बात है। भगत सिंह भी वही उन्हीं जनरेशन में था ना। तो गांधी ने एक अलग रास्ता अपनाया, नेहरू ने अलग रास्ता अपनाया, और वो कुछ अलग करके चले गए, जो कि कहीं पे भी हमको कुछ बंदों को शूट करता, कुछ को नहीं शूट करता। मेरे को शूट नहीं करता, बाय द वे। इट्स नॉट अ वे टू independence. It was not independence, it was just shifting movement. सर उससे अभी जब बात ज्यादा होगी तो फिर मैं अपना ओपिनियन रखूंगा। थैंक्स लॉट सर, आपके पास टाइम भी कम है तो
क्या,
सर
बल्कि जो अगला हमारा इवेंट है वो पंजाब सेंट्रिक होना है, तो उसके अंदर इट वुड बी इंटरेस्टिंग टू हियर योर ओपिनियंस। आपकी बात को मैं अंडरस्टैंड करता हूँ, वी ऑलरेडी हाईलाइटेड दैट इन दिस स्ट्रीम एज वेल, कि 3 तरह की कम्युनिटीज़ हैं जो अपोज करती हैं गांधी की लीडरशिप को, या एक यूनाइटेड इंडिया को, या एक बंटवारा ना होने को प्रेफर करती हैं। वो एक तो रिलीजियस एसोसिएशन के ऊपर वो लोग जो माइनॉरिटीज़ के अंदर रह गए, एक वो जिनके सूबे या जिनके शहर डिवाइड हो गए, तीसरे वो जो बस इकोनॉमिक्स और क्रिकेट गेम वगैरह को करके और वो ख्वाबों की दुनिया के अंदर रहते हैं। आई एम नॉट सेइंग यू आर द लास्ट वन, आपका ऑब्वियसली पंजाब।
ओके सर, थैंक्स अ लॉट फॉर योर वर्ड्स। मैं आपको सिर्फ यही बात कर रहा हूँ कि मेरे पास ऐसे अंग्रेजों के, गोरों के जो हमने सोचे हैं और देखे हैं, उनके ऐसे एक्सपीरियंस हैं अभी मेरी जो लाइफ टाइम है उसमें भी एक्सपीरियंस है कि वो गुलाम कैसे बनाते हैं। नेक्स्ट टाइम आई विल शेयर विद यू ऑल गाइस इफ आई एम अवेलेबल। लेकिन गोरों का गुलाम होना बिल्कुल वो नहीं है अभी हिंदुस्तानी के लिए, इंडियन के लिए। थैंक यू सर।
नो वरीज, अगला वाला हम थर्सडे को करेंगे और फिर फ्राइडे को, तो डेफिनेटली विल आप चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कर लें एंड विल फॉलो अप। किसी और को कुछ
इनके साथ तो हम बहुत पहले से, लेकिन ये बीच में थोड़े डाउन हो गए थे, बंद हो गए थे, हो सकता है
इनको हम अप कर लेंगे।
I will start doing, मैं करूंगा या स्ट्रीम स्टार्ट एंड ऑफ दिस मंथ अगेन।
भाई करेगा, पहले का ना भाई
विक इन्होंने भी अपना कि मैं सब्सक्राइब कर रहा है, देयर नाइस पीपल है कि पाकिस्तान तो है, बट वी कैन टॉक टू गलबात हो सकती है।
जी जी, कोई नहीं गलबात सब ना होगी भाजी,
Yeah,
नहीं गलबात कर ली बैठे हैं, ये सोशल मीडिया इट्स फॉर गलबात। थैंक यू सर,
yeah.
थैंक यू, बाय बाय,
चलें जी,
टेक केयर,
बहुत
बाय
बहुत
बाय।
शुक्रिया। Is there anyone who wants to make a closing statement?
No, I'm right. I'm done. Thank you.
All done. Okay, thank you very much. Slowly we're getting better. Hopefully we'll get better as we move on. Thank you very much. Bye.